Hey class, in this video we're going to talk about Descartes' exchange of letters with Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia. Bohemia is roughly nowadays what we would call the Czech Republic. Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia entered into a correspondence with Descartes that produced many letters over many philosophical and scientific topics. The letters that we are going to look at today come from early in this letter exchange, and I want to focus on the letters pertaining to Machiavelli. We really have three philosophers in today's video: the princess, Descartes, and Machiavelli. And I think Princess Elizabeth shows a better understanding of Machiavelli in her letters than Descartes does. And the reason why I say that is because she notes that Machiavelli's overall goal is stability, right? That what Machiavelli wants in Princess Elizabeth's view is to produce a stable republic, and that all of his advice, all of his suggestions, all of his maxims, all go towards producing stability. And she thinks that once you understand that, then everything else that Machiavelli says sort of falls into place. Descartes is initially more critical of Machiavelli. He thinks that Machiavelli sort of suggests a number of things that are disturbing, amoral, and contrary to reason, and we'll look at what he has to say about that in a minute. So, why are we looking at these letters? A couple different reasons. First, these letters show us that Descartes was quite familiar with Machiavelli, but they also show us the extent of his familiarity, right? That he's reading Machiavelli because Princess Elizabeth recommended that he do so. So why are they reading Machiavelli? Well, Princess Elizabeth is a princess, and Machiavelli gives advice to princes and to political leaders and theorizes on republics and principalities. It would make sense then that Princess Elizabeth would have an interest in Machiavelli's work. So, what does Descartes think about Machiavelli? Well, Descartes, as we see in his letter, thinks that Machiavelli makes a couple of sort of basic errors that he will object to. First, he thinks that Machiavelli does not sharply distinguish between coming to power justly and coming to power unjustly, and that therefore Machiavelli's advice is confused, that different advice should be given to those who come to power justly than should be given to those who come to power unjustly. Princess Elizabeth does not think that this is a valid objection to Machiavelli's thought. Princess Elizabeth argues that all princes will think that they've come to power justly, that all princes will approve of their methods, so that the distinction that Descartes is arguing for is not one that any prince would make. Furthermore, Princess Elizabeth argues that Machiavelli's starting point is the situation that is the most difficult, that he wants to give advice to princes that are trying to found a completely new republic or a completely new principality. Romulus, right? If you're in a situation like that, which is the most difficult thing that one can do. It's the most difficult thing that a prince will do, and anything else after, any other sort of formulation of a principality or a republic will be easier. So Princess Elizabeth's idea is that what Machiavelli is giving us advice for is sort of extreme situations. And when one is in this kind of extreme situation, then Machiavelli's advice is good advice. And moreover, that by studying these extreme situations, we will also be able to better adapt ourselves to less extreme situations. Now, Descartes raises a number of objections to Machiavelli, all of which I think Princess Elizabeth's comments refute. So as the letters go on, and we see Princess Elizabeth essentially defending Machiavelli and suggesting that Descartes has misread him, in the subsequent letter, Descartes says that he's gone back and read not just the Prince, but also the Discourses on Livy, and he finds nothing objectionable in the Discourses on Livy, which tells us something perhaps about Descartes, because there are many things in the Discourses on Livy that people might find objectionable, as in, Romulus murdering his brother and things like that. In the same letter, Descartes mentions Socrates and Socrates' divine sign, right? So if you remember way back when we were doing Plato and Xenophon, Socrates would make a reference to his daimon, or his divine sign, which was this little voice in his head with this feeling in the pit of his stomach that would go off when he was about to do something wrong. When he was about to do something immoral, Socrates' sort of spider sense would go off and warn him not to do whatever it is he was thinking of doing. And it's interesting that Descartes brings this up in the context of Machiavelli. Because if there's one thing that Machiavelli does not have, it's a daimon like that, right? There's no little buzzing that goes off in the pit of your stomach if you're Machiavelli and you're about to do something wrong. Why does Descartes bring this up? Well, we have to look at how he interprets the daimon. The daimon on Descartes' reading is essentially a warning from reason, right? The daimon for Descartes represents reason, and it goes off when one is about to act irrationally. When Descartes is talking about his inner voice, right, Socrates' daimon, he says, "My superstition also gets support from the authority of Socrates. What is commonly called Socrates' inner voice was surely nothing but being accustomed to follow his inner inclinations and believing that his undertakings would go well when he had a secret feeling of cheerfulness, and badly when he was sad. Indeed, it would be very superstitious to carry this belief as far as Socrates is said to have done. According to Plato's report, he would even stay at home whenever his inner voice advised him not to go out." Descartes is doing something interesting with Socrates here. On the one hand, he's associating himself with Socrates and Socrates' inner voice, but he's completely reinterpreting it from the way Plato interprets it. I mean, he says that Plato's interpretation is superstitious. In Plato, right, the daimon is a messenger from the god who is essentially encouraging Socrates to make the moral choice. In Descartes' interpretation, the daimon is just this inner voice that has a kind of cheerfulness. And the cheerfulness comes from a self-assurance that one is doing the right thing. And how does one know that one is doing the right thing? Because one's followed the method that we talked about in other videos. The Socratic daimon that is so important in Plato, in Descartes becomes merely a inner self-assurance that one has correctly applied the method and reached the proper decision. Now, how does this relate back to Machiavelli? Well, his principal complaint about Machiavelli is that Machiavelli doesn't follow the method. Princess Elizabeth makes this point when she's defending Machiavelli's claim that a prince cannot always be good. And Descartes, if you go back and read the letters, was very critical of that claim. But the princess points out that Descartes' criticism sort of misses the mark because Descartes has a very idiosyncratic understanding of what it means to be good, right? For Descartes, to be good means to act in accordance with reason, which is to say, to act on the basis of the method. And she points out to Descartes that nobody thought like this before. Machiavelli, when he was writing, generations before Descartes, when people meant good, they didn't mean act according to reason. They meant sort of act according to the traditions and virtues and morals that are held up as authoritative. And in that sense, Princess Elizabeth says that Machiavelli is right to say that princes won't always be able. Princess Elizabeth is right to say that princes will not always be able to be good. So there's a lot more going on in these letters. I just want to focus on their exchange about Machiavelli. And I think one of the interesting things is that you see that Princess Elizabeth really gets the better of Descartes in these letters. Sometimes Descartes is described as being her tutor, but she was much, much more than that. They were clearly peers, and Princess Elizabeth is, in other parts of the letter, she's correcting him on things or raising objections to his theories. She's a really important figure in the development of Cartesian philosophy. And unfortunately, most of her philosophizing, takes the form of these letters. And letters are not a widely used genre in philosophy, so she's understudied. Right? If she had written a textbook or essays, they might be more widely read, but instead she writes these letters to Descartes that are full of philosophical analysis and information and detail, but also full of, talking about her brother killing someone and things like that philosophers typically aren't always interested in. So, in any case, that's Descartes and Princess Elizabeth.